Hello, I'm Shaun Richards and welcome to a very hot London town. Subject I want to talk about today is the issue of Europe, so we're jumping across the channel here, and what the European Central Bank will do tomorrow. Events have moved on apace yesterday and today. To give you an example of yesterday, the International Monetary Fund suggested that world economic growth will be a bit slower than they thought before. And the issue here is that there's been a succession of these. I'm no great fan of their exact numbers. They're normally not right, but they might be able to get the trend correct. This has been followed up today by some worrying business surveys for the euro area. What I mean by that, to give you an example, is that in France, the manufacturing sector has now moved into a small contraction. The actual surveys themselves aren't that accurate, so somewhere around nothing's happening, if you want to put it like that. This is a change. The French economy may still be growing a little bit. And if we add into that what's happening in Germany, those of you that have followed this will realise that so far in 2019, this has been a very weak run for the manufacturing sector there, because the trade wars with China and the issues around that have impacted on, for example, the motor manufacturing area in Germany and various other parts that are linked into that. And this morning's reading was the weakest of all. In the way that they do it, it was 43.1 on a measure where 50 is unchanged, so showing quite a marked slowdown, which backs up various other numbers that we've had. And if we take this wider now and into the broader sense, this brings us to the idea that Europe, and the euro area in particular, is in a bit of economic trouble again. If the survey's right, economic growth was a mere 0.2% in the quarter just gone. It'll only be 0.1 in this one. So as you can see, that will focus the attention of the European Central Bank. Why? Well, because it was only 7 months ago, in fact, not even quite that it ended its own stimulus programme. So it hasn't got very far, has it, up the road, before it's looking like it's going to have to start again. And this raises a deeper question, which is this the future now? Is it always going to be like that? Can economies survive without it? And if they can't, what's causing it? I have a couple of thoughts on that sort of thing if we look at it from news again this week. For example, if we look at Italy, it's had troubles with its banking sector, and perhaps the strongest bank, and I'm not saying a lot, but perhaps the strongest bank's been UniCredit there. Well, that's looking like it's going to lay off 10,000 jobs. So, now remember, we're a long way up the road now from the credit crunch. This morning has brought news from Deutsche Bank, which is a lot worse than what it was forecasting only about a fortnight ago. I think the latest quarter it lost 3.1 billion euros. Seeing as people were giving strong hints only 2 weeks ago as it announced its restructuring, you can see that, again, this is another lurch down. And my issue here is not particularly to get at those two banks, but to say that they're symbolic of the whole banking structure. How can it go forwards and help industry, help business, loan properly to it, if the banks themselves are in a mess? They don't really have any business model, I think, anymore. And then here's the rub. Say the European Central Bank cuts interest rates further tomorrow. So the deposit rate drops from minus 0.4 to minus 0.5, minus 0.6. That'll hit the banks even more. And so we've got ourselves into quite a situation here. If we leap back a decade or so, a lot of the initial moves in the credit crunch era by central banks were to help the banks. But in Europe, they've now stepped up so much that the next bits hurt them, because the idea of a 0% interest rate or going below it is a real problem for them, because they're terrified of paying that to their depositors in case they leave. And just to be clear on that, by paying, what I mean is the depositors will be charged. So there's the conundrum, and this is the problem of our times. We're a decade up the road, the banks look zombified, and yet the central banks look like they would give us more of the same measures that haven't helped us get out of the mess. Thank you.